An incredible dinner revealed an unexpected place set for my late husband. My heart trembled. The air was thick with the rich, savory scent of roasting turkey, an aroma that wafted through Sarah's quaint Maplewood home. As she pulled the golden bird from the oven, her spirit curled inwards, a tight knot of dread tightening around her chest. Thanksgiving, once a joyous occasion with Tom, had morphed into a lingering ache, a stark reminder of his absence. Each year she meticulously prepared this family dinner, an endeavor to honor his memory, yet it felt like a test. Could she truly hold everything together? Would they ever be a whole family again? The silent whispers of neighbors and colleagues crept into her mind, echoing doubts that twisted like a knife. What did they think of her? A single mother? A high school teacher striving to balance her passion and parenting? "You're doing your best," she reminded herself, yet those words slipped into murky waters of uncertainty. What if she failed? What if Lily grew up forgetting the warmth of her father's embrace? The specters of judgment became nearly unbearable. Friends used to admire her dedication, but now they exchanged worried glances, questions lingering unspoken. Phrases peeled away like wallpaper, haunting her. She needs help. Why doesn't she remarry? Each comment, a barb she felt too deeply. Before she could completely sink into despair, the doorbell rang, jolting her from her thoughts. The arrival of her in-laws created an atmosphere of comfort mixed with unasked questions. Hugs exchanged, laughter bubbled, but amidst it all, his shadow lurked. The empty space at the table echoed louder now. Intending to accommodate everyone, she set an extra place for Tom. A ritual she felt compelled to maintain, but now questioned with every passing second. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As they sat around the table, the chaos of laughter and sharing memories turned surreal. Yet, when Sarah noticed an extra fork laid out for Tom, a direct confrontation of her loneliness, a tremor ran through her heart. She felt as though she could barely breathe, the weight of loss pressing down as if it required acknowledgement, a place setting for him. Why was it there? A mistaken action, or an unspoken message from her mother-in-law? Suddenly, the room grew thick with tension as memories clashed harshly with the present. Each story told about Tom was a reminder of the love that still flickered in the air. A candle flickering on borrowed time. A growing wave of affection battled against an undercurrent of sorrow as Sarah's smile began to strain. Was she ready to face the truth that Tom was gone? Or would she cling to the comfort of their past? The laughter, once melodic, now felt like a cacophony of soulful heartache. You could see her grappling with emotions surfacing through her body. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured wine, her breath uneven. With each passing moment, she struggled internally against her own doubts and fears. Could she create a new normal for Lily? One that honored Tom's spirit while allowing her to flourish as a unique individual? As dessert approached, the festive warmth dissolved into an unspoken void where hollow expectations loomed. Would she risk facing the truth, or allow the facade of a perfect dinner to carry them forward? The echoes of Tom's love propelling her into the unknown. The swirling thoughts left poignancy in the air, a yearning for resolution that felt just out of reach. All she could see were flickering candles, an empty seat, and the unanswered question trailing behind them. As the dinner settled into a pattern of casual conversation, Sarah felt like an observer, a mere figure in the backdrop of her own life. the clinking of forks and the laughter that seemed like music from another world pressed against her heart. She fought against the urge to retreat into her thoughts, grappling with the heaviness that coursed through her being. Each compliment aimed at her cooking, each heartfelt anecdote about Tom, felt like a tug of war with her grief. She had spent days perfecting the meal, desperate to make this Thanksgiving one Tom would have proudly relished. Yet here she sat, torn between the duty to honor his memory and the painful chatter that mocked her solitude. Lily's laughter rang out, pure and unguarded, filling the cracks of silence that were beginning to overpower Sarah's resolve. It was this innocent joy that stirred a sense of determination within her. Would she allow herself to be swallowed by the sadness that crept at the edges of her mind? Or would she rise above it, forging a new path for herself and her daughter? That night, as the last of the guests departed and the house fell silent, she faced the quietude head-on. The empty chair felt like a challenge, a stark reminder of her shifting reality. Instead of succumbing to the embrace of loss, she decided it was time to confront her fear, time to explore the very thing that had begun to fray at her sense of self, her teaching career. Sarah glanced at her cluttered desk that had become a compilation of lesson plans, report cards, and mundane paperwork. She had once found joy in that organized chaos. It had been her sanctuary, a space where she inspired students to reach their potential. Now it felt more like a residual obligation, a reminder of the person she used to be before life unmade her. That night, she began to devise a plan. If she expanded her curriculum to include more contemporary topics that resonated with her students, perhaps she could rediscover her passion. She scribbled notes furiously, ideas bubbling to the forefront of her mind. What if she introduced a unit on resilience? A journey through loss and growth, mirroring her struggle while connecting emotionally with her students. And then, in the midst of her creativity, doubt whispered insidiously. What if the students regarded her as inadequate for failing to keep her family's existence whole? What if they saw her not as a mentor, but as a broken person unworthy of their respect? The hesitations echoed, reminding her of each unsteady step she took after Tom's passing, each moment when she strived to keep the facade intact. But as she drafted lesson ideas and potential readings, Sarah felt a dawning realization, a spark igniting in the depths of her mind. If she nurtured openness in her classroom, she could foster connections not only with her students, but also within herself. By showing vulnerability, she could reclaim parts of her identity that had been overshadowed by grief. Suddenly it clicked. The intertwining of her personal experience with her professional life wouldn't weaken her. It would empower her. She envisioned herself sharing her journey, bringing a sense of authenticity to the curriculum, and in that exchange, she might illuminate the path for others navigating similar storms. As she looked out the window, watching the stars twinkle against the darkening sky, a tentative resolve unfolded within her. It wasn't about erasing Tom from their lives. It was about carrying his spirit forward while embracing the present, turning the chapter into one of growth and resilience. The next morning, she vowed to reach out to her colleagues for support, to collaborate on creating that new unit. She would share her vision, exploring the possibility of a memorial project to honor Tom's memory in a way that would inspire the students to embrace their own journeys, together. But as Sarah prepared to approach them, a part of her froze, the old fears creeping back. This conversation could lead to vulnerability beyond her comfort zone. Was she truly ready to confront her past and intertwine it into her future? The moment of truth had come, and with it hung the question. Could she build the bridge between her grief and her teaching, or would she hesitate once again, afraid to let the world see her as she truly was? The morning sun spilled into the living room, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air, as Sarah sat at her desk, her computer screen reflecting her wavering thoughts. The room felt heavy with expectation. She had outlined her ideas for the new curriculum on resilience, the guiding principles echoing in her mind. but now the weight of actualization pressed against her chest. As she sipped her coffee, the warmth traveled through her, a stark contrast to the sinking feeling in her stomach. It was a simple decision, yet behind it lay an intricate web of fears and hopes. Could vulnerability pave the way for a deeper connection, not just with her students, but also with herself? Would they see strength in her? Or would they see the cracks? She took a deep breath, summoning the courage she had felt the night before. Could sharing her journey truly create a bridge rather than a chasm? With her heart racing, she dashed off an email to her colleagues, proposing a meeting to discuss her initiative. The click of the send button echoed like a small drumbeat in her ears, a promise of change accompanied by the thrill of uncertainty. Later that afternoon, her anxiety simmered as she stood at the threshold of the teacher's lounge. The buzz of laughter and chatter filled the air, an audible reminder of the camaraderie she once enjoyed. Sarah hesitated, recalling moments of sharing ideas over coffee, but today felt different. Today she was stepping into a new realm, one where she risked exposing her raw edges. Pushing open the door, she felt overwhelmed but resolute. The laughter ceased momentarily as she entered, and she caught a few friendly smiles directed toward her. They seemed engaged in discussions about textbooks and lesson plans, but Sarah had come with something more personal. Her heartbeat drummed a chaotic rhythm that echoed her insecurities. "Hey, Sarah, we were just talking about the upcoming semester. Want to join us?" Claire, a fellow teacher with an infectious energy, waved her over. With a surge of determination, she nodded and took a seat. But as the conversation flowed around her, her words hesitated at the edge of her lips. She struggled with the transition from casual small talk to the revelation she needed to share. "Actually, I wanted to bring something up," she began, her voice threading through the warm atmosphere. The room quieted, inviting attention. "I've been thinking about how we can support our students through themes of resilience and growth, especially after challenging times." The response was immediate. Ideas bounced back and forth, infused with enthusiasm, yet as her colleagues envisioned various approaches, a knot tightened in her throat. She had wanted to share the personal connection behind her proposal, the loss that shaped her need for this subject matter. Yet the words remained locked inside, frustration mixed with fear, a cocktail of emotions that rendered her momentarily breathless. What if they didn't understand? What if they saw the weight of her grief as a burden rather than a badge of experience? She needed that leap of faith. "Actually, I've been through something myself," Sarah finally managed, her voice shaking slightly. "I lost my husband last year, and it made me realize how crucial it is to talk about resilience, to find strength after loss." Silence enveloped the room, punctuated by the shifting of chairs and the faint sound of recognition. She could almost feel the eyes of her colleagues upon her, weighing her raw honesty. But then Claire leaned forward, warmth radiating from her expression. "That's incredibly brave, Sarah. I think what you've shared could really resonate with the students," Claire said, her sincerity cutting through the tension. Emboldened, Sarah's heart raced at the beginning of this new chapter. She began to outline her ideas more clearly, realizing that the fear she had carried was beginning to dissipate amidst the support unfolding around her. But the meeting was still in its early stages, and the details of her plan remained precarious. The deeper she delved into her vision, the more she sensed the need for a solid foundation. A plan that would honor Tom while also preparing her to guide her students through shared experiences of healing. As they wrapped up the discussion, Sarah left the lounge not just with a budding alliance, but the realization that her journey was far from over. Her heart brimmed with unspoken words, ideas that demanded exploration and connection. The question lingered within her as she stepped into the corridors. Were her emotions truly stable enough to weave into this narrative? Or was there still a risk that being raw and honest could fracture her fragile triumph? Determined to embrace the chaos, she prepared for the next step. Could she truly bring together her grief and her career in a way that offered healing both for herself and her students? The wind gusted through the trees outside Sarah's window as she delved deeper into her curriculum plan. Each page she read felt like an exploration into uncharted territory, a landscape filled with ideas brimming with profound honesty and potential for connection. However, the memories of her husband ebbed and flowed in her mind, interspersed between her notes. She often wondered if she could elevate her own voice to match the echo of his encouragement. With a determination fueled by the support from her colleagues, Sarah set aside her insecurities. She envisioned her classroom as a sanctuary, a space where discussions about resilience could spark transformation, both for her students and herself. Yet the vision was still hazy. She needed clarity, a guiding light to illuminate her path forward. As the week progressed, she found herself seeking out resources. Books on grief, articles discussing emotional intelligence in education, and workshops focusing on teaching resilience. Each reading material brought unfamiliar feelings to the surface. There were moments when her chest tightened with memories, yet there were also moments of relief, as if she was blowing dust off long-forgotten shelves of her mind, unearthing important facets of her identity she had submerged for too long. One afternoon, while nestled in her favorite nook at the local library, she heard snippets of laughter from a nearby group of high school students gathering together for a study session. Their enthusiasm reminded her of her own youthful earnestness, how she had once been filled with dreams of changing the world through education. But now it felt as if she was navigating through a fog, uncertain where the path lay. Determined to regain her sense of purpose, Sarah jotted down her thoughts, formulating a list of questions to guide her next steps. How could she weave her personal experiences into this educational narrative? What should the key messages be? How could she ensure that her own vulnerability would inspire and uplift rather than overshadow? Soon after, she reached out to her colleagues again, this time suggesting a collaborative project where they could share their own personal journeys tied to resilience. The thought of them joining her for a brainstorming session invigorated her. Could it be that others too had stories that could enrich this curriculum? Their subsequent meeting buzzed with energy. Ideas bounced off walls like the excited chatter in the teacher's lounge. It was a melding of creative minds, and slowly, the outline of her vision began taking form. The afternoon dissolved into conversations that ventured beyond the classroom, acknowledging shared vulnerabilities and cultivating trust. But as the discussion deepened, Sarah's mind wrestled with a shadow of doubt. Would her colleagues view her as a peer? Or would her grief unravel their potential partnership? Each moment of honesty in the conversation felt like a test, a fragile line drawn between the need to connect and the risk of alienating those she sought to engage with. As discussions wrapped up, Claire's voice cut through her thoughts. We should have a dinner to reflect on everything we've been designing. A way to celebrate not just the plans, but also our stories that have inspired them. For a heartbeat, Sarah felt panic clawing at her stomach. Dinner meant intimacy, vulnerability. It felt like too much. But Claire's excited enthusiasm prodded at her reluctance. What if the stories shared at this dinner could form the foundation for their new curriculum? Stepping away from the meeting, the tension within her swelled, yet again. What would she do when faced with a physical symbol of the empty chair at the table that once belonged to Tom? Could she withstand the emotional tidal wave when his absence hovered so palpably in a room filled with understanding? Her heart raced not just at the idea of the dinner, but with the overwhelming hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the promise of community was right beside her if she dared to reach out for it. The question now loomed larger than her fears. How would she navigate this upcoming dinner where transparency intersected personal growth, and revelations about grief collided with newfound ambitions? Days passed, each one drawing closer to the dinner. A date set in the calendar that morphed into a semi-mythical beast looming over her thoughts. Sarah's mind raced through endless rehearsals, imagining how she would navigate the evening, embroiled in tensions that had previously felt foreign. Would she speak about her husband, or conceal those memories in polite silence? As the appointed day approached, the decision weighed heavily on her. In preparation, she meticulously combed through her notes, finding threads of inspiration amid her plans. A lesson on resilience that might capture her students, but also a lesson about the complexity of human experience that she herself was grappling with. The idea of merging her personal narrative with the academic content loomed dauntingly large. Yet there was no turning back. This dinner was more than a simple gathering. It was a crucible inviting transformation, both personal and professional. The night arrived, and Sarah stood before her mirror, fixing the small details of her appearance, the fit of her dress, the tidiness of her hair. Yet beneath the polished exterior, she felt frayed. The thoughts that coursed through her were intoxicating and terrifying. How might this evening shift the dynamics of her relationship with her colleagues? What if she unlocked a deeper understanding and shared vulnerability that boomeranged back in ways she couldn't anticipate? As she arrived at the venue, a familiar spot where laughter and conversation always flowed freely, dread settled in her stomach. Each face welcomed her, and yet the absence of Tom seemingly held a spotlight over her. She took a deep breath, scanning the room for Claire's reassuring presence. It was in the light banter that Sarah drew calmness, recognizing that she did not need to shoulder the narrative alone. The dinner commenced. Laughter enfolded her like a warm blanket as stories emerged, painting vivid strokes of resilience and struggle across the evening. One by one, her colleagues shared their own tales of vulnerability, and Sarah felt her heartache balance on the precipice of revelation. The humanity shining through their stories illuminated tracks of courage, prompting Sarah to reflect on her own river of grief. She realized she was not merely an outsider. Her experiences mirrored theirs, weaving her into a fabric of shared lives. And then it happened. With every clink of a fork and each echo of genuine laughter, the nagging thought of her husband persisted in the recesses of her mind. It lingered, like an unfinished story begging to be told, pushing her towards the edge of decision. As dessert was served, a moment of silence punctuated laughter, and she found herself poised to speak. A voice breaking through the adhesive bond that had kept her story for far too long. "Can I share something?" she began, the warmth of the spotlight both electrifying and horrifying. Her words tumbled forth, filling the air with a mixture of uncertainty and release. She spoke of Tom, his belief in her ability to foster resilience not just academically but in every aspect of life, and how grief had become a silent companion on her journey. As the weight of her honesty cascaded over the table, the vulnerability radiated back to her through their attentive eyes. The shimmering connections formed between sorrow and hope in that moment made specters of fear melt away. There was no judgment, only understanding. When she finished, the room felt charged, alive with the echoes of shared recognition. It was no longer just her pain. It had transformed into a collective experience binding them in a new layer of mutual respect. But as she breathed in the palpable tension of acceptance, she noticed a lingering gaze from Claire. There was something in her expression. Was it a plea for Sarah to dig deeper? The thought rolled over her like the tide. She was on the cusp of facing another layer of their dialogue, where each story could take them one step further towards an unforeseen destination. Caught between what she had shared and the unsaid, the dinner took on an unexpected complexity. Would she have the courage to reveal more, go deeper, and embrace even greater vulnerability? Would facing the shadows lead to the kind of transformation they were all hoping for? A new question emerged, demanding answers. What lies beneath the surface of shared stories that might yet reshape her path as an educator? Sarah's heart raced, the charged atmosphere of the dinner swirling around her. Her confession had opened a door, one she could either walk through or close firmly behind her. Claire's gaze was intense, holding an unspoken challenge, as if she dared Sarah to dive deeper into the murky waters of her grief and resilience. The weight of possibility hung heavy in the air, tempting her to abandon hesitation and embrace the next step of her evolution. The chatter resumed, but Sarah could hardly focus on the small talk enveloping her. Instead, thoughts swirled like leaves caught in a gust of wind. If sharing Tom's influence could be the catalyst for connection, what else remained in the recesses of her heart? What stories had she stashed away, under layers of silence and decorum? In the days following the dinner, Sarah found herself haunted by reflections on vulnerability. Each time she entered her classroom, she was confronted by the faces of eager students who reflected her hopes and fears. Would they benefit from her journey? Or would sharing her own story overshadow her role as their guide? The stakes felt impossibly high. She mulled over pedagogical philosophies, fervently questioning her ability to draw important lessons from her grief. As she scribbled notes in her office one evening, a familiar tension nestled in her chest, a burgeoning realization that resonated deeply. Teaching wasn't merely about imparting knowledge. It was about creating connections that foster growth. Her own experience could enrich the curriculum if framed thoughtfully. The notion spread through her like wildfire, igniting a sense of purpose. Yet, the flip side remained. By sharing her truth, could she risk overshadowing the very conversations she wanted to enhance? Navigating the line between personal narrative and professional responsibility became her daily battle. Every interaction with her students felt tinged with urgency. She began to consider how she could incorporate her reflections into broader lessons on resilience, empathy, and the human condition. During lunch breaks, she found herself sketching ideas for lessons that would weave personal reflection into academic content, setting up a framework for dialogue about overcoming challenges. But even as her ambition flourished, seeds of self-doubt crept in. She questioned whether her colleagues would still regard her as a credible educator. What if they viewed her newfound openness as weakness? The idea gnawed at her. If they perceived her as damaged rather than dynamic, would she lose not just their respect, but her own sense of authority? Gradually, those uncertain feelings morphed into determination. Rather than fearing judgment, she envisioned standing before her class with the poise that comes from embracing one's truth. She could share the harrowing joy of finding strength through vulnerability, transforming her grief into a tool for forging deeper understanding. But was she prepared for the reactions that might follow? The upcoming faculty meeting echoed in her mind, a setting poised to challenge her insecurities, yet also offer fertile ground for growth. As she mulled over the lessons she could present, she wondered, what would her colleagues think of her willingness to merge her experiences with her teaching? That evening, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at her notes. The prospect of reaching out, of blending her story with the narratives her students shared in her classroom, brought hope and fear in equal measure. Then, a new thought shimmered at the edge of her consciousness. This venture could be an invitation, not just for her, but for her colleagues to reflect on their experiences too. As she jotted ideas on resilience, she envisioned the meeting becoming a platform for shared storytelling, challenging all of them to confront their fears openly. A step into the unknown was routine, yet within it could lie the possibility of authentic connection. But as she prepared herself for the meeting, a question echoed louder than all others. Would she have the courage to invite others into this dialogue of authenticity? Would confronting her past help reshape not only her identity as an educator, but also the dynamic within her school? The next morning brought an urgent clarity, an opportunity to not just share her story, but to facilitate a space for others. As her decisions hung like ripe fruit above her, she questioned whether the next step would bring healing or further complicate her journey ahead. The faculty meeting loomed ahead, an appointment marked on her calendar in bold letters that felt more like an interrogation than a collaboration. With each tick of the clock, Sarah's apprehension swelled. She had prepared her notes on resilience and empathy countless times. Yet each review left her disquieted. Would her colleagues see the merit of her approach, or would they dismiss her as overly sentimental? The question hung heavily. As she settled into her seat, the fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, and the scent of brewed coffee filled the air, a familiar comfort that clashed with her rising anxiety. Her colleagues filed in, greeting each other with practiced pleasantries, their banter punctuated by laughter that seemed to amplify her solitude. Sarah felt painfully aware of her difference, the story she carried like a stone in her pocket, while they exchanged mundane details of their weekends. When the principal called the meeting to order, Sarah's heart pounded. She noticed Claire's gaze landing on her, a silent nod of encouragement that threw her into a spiral of introspection. It was time to step into her truth, not just her grief, but the lessons intertwined within it. As the agenda unfolded with updates on curriculum changes and administrative news, Sarah fought the urge to retreat into silence. Finally, it was her turn to speak. Standing up felt akin to climbing a mountain, her legs quaking beneath her. She clutched her notes tightly, their edges digging into her palms, grounding her. With a deep breath, Sarah cleared her throat. I'd like to share something that has been on my mind. A perspective I believe could shape our interactions with students. The room quieted, eyes turned to her, some curious, others skeptical. She began with Tom's story, exploring the layers of loss that had woven her teaching philosophy. As she spoke, Sarah felt the pull of vulnerability wrap around her, a paradoxical comfort in exposing her heart. She cautiously opened the door to her experience, framing it within the framework of resilience and growth, hoping to ignite a spark of empathy in the room. To her surprise, one by one, colleagues responded. Jennifer spoke of her own struggles in balancing work and family, while Marcus shared the loss of his father. The floodgates opened, transforming the meeting into an unanticipated dialogue about personal narratives. As voices mingled, the atmosphere shifted from superficial to sincere. Yet, lurking beneath her excitement, doubt flared up once more. This raw sharing, could it betray professionalism? Was she leading her colleagues toward connection or chaos? Each confession gave her strength, but they also complicated the fabric of their relationships. What if the very discussions meant to unify instead fractured their collaboration? At the end of the meeting, while encouragement enveloped her, Sarah faced the specter of her fears. Had she misstepped? Would her willingness to reveal her truth jeopardize her standing among colleagues? Questions spun like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind, but a remaining ember of hope flickered. Perhaps vulnerability could serve as a bridge, not a chasm. As she gathered her materials, Claire approached her, a wide smile signaling admiration and relief. That was incredible, Sarah. You didn't just teach us something. You opened a space for real connection. Thank you for having the courage to share. A swell of warmth filled Sarah's chest. Maybe, just maybe, she was not only a teacher, but also a catalyst for transformation. The concept felt revolutionary, yet the path ahead remained shadowed with uncertainty. Leaving the meeting, she felt lighter, yet a new question pressed into her consciousness. What would happen now that the barriers had begun to dissolve? The connections she had stirred felt promising, but how would her story intertwine with the stories of those around her in the weeks to come? She could sense a change on the horizon, but what kind of transformation awaited her? The moment of clarity pushed her through the doorway, invigorated and apprehensive. She was walking a path unknown, yet the potential for deeper understanding loomed alluringly ahead. Sarah's heart raced as she stepped into her home, her sanctuary transformed by the weight of her revelations at the meeting. The familiar surroundings, usually comforting, felt charged with an unfamiliar energy. The notes and papers she had brought home lay strewn across the dining table, remnants of her earlier courage. She could still hear Claire's words echoing in her mind, a gentle reminder of the significance of her vulnerability. As her gaze fell upon the empty seat at the table, Tom's seat. An overwhelming wave of grief washed over her again. Before she could fully process her emotions, the scent of roasted chicken wafted from the kitchen, cutting through her turmoil. Cooking had always been a way for her to immerse herself in memories, each recipe a lifeline to better days, a method to channel her energy into something productive. Tonight, however, the meal felt heavy, each ingredient weighed down by the absence of the one person she longed to share it with most. She had wanted tonight to be different, to celebrate the newfound connections with her colleagues and the potential for growth. Instead, she felt both buoyed and crushed beneath the gravity of who she'd lost. Gathering her strength, Sarah moved toward the kitchen, purposefully ignoring the quaking feeling brewing in her chest. As she chopped vegetables, the rhythmic thud of the knife against the cutting board provided a strange comfort, a distraction from the internal conflict swirling within. She replayed the meeting in her mind, the way her words had pulled her colleagues closer, the way they had let down their guards. It was intoxicating to consider that her openness could foster an environment of shared strength. But then anxiety pricked at her again. What if vulnerability was a double-edged sword? By exposing her struggles, had she placed herself in a position of weakness? The whispers of doubt buoyed by her consistent self-critique echoed louder than the praises. Could a part of her colleague's connection stem from sympathy rather than understanding? Lost in her thoughts, she nearly cut her finger, sharply reminding her to focus. It was a small injury, a fleeting moment, but it underscored the need for clarity in her life, both personally and professionally. She realized she could not solely lean on external validation to navigate her way. The connections she had made were valuable, yet she needed to ground her own sense of purpose before channeling it outward again. Dinner prepared, Sarah set the table, intentionally placing an extra setting for Tom. As if by doing so, she could conjure his spirit back to her side. The act felt raw, potent. It was a moment of remembrance woven into her daily ritual, a way of honoring the past while moving forward. Would tonight yield any clarity, or would she be lost in her old habits of grief and doubt? As she took her place at the table and glanced at the empty chair opposite her, a sudden determination flooded her. The meeting had equipped her with a sense of belonging, yet it was now her turn to harvest that energy into new channels. It was time to schedule that workshop on resilience she had long envisioned, a platform to engage her colleagues in deeper conversations while integrating her experiences in real, tangible ways. Yet the thought unsettled her. What if she stumbled into deeper emotional waters than she could manage? What if pursuing this path only invited more risks, more fragile connections? The sound of the doorbell snapped her from her thoughts, its ding reverberating through the silence. Who could it be? Her heart raced once more as she approached the door, a tapestry of fear and flickering hope intertwining within her. The night had already stirred change, but how wild would the next moment become? As she turned the doorknob, a sense of trepidation gripped her. What awaited her on the other side? Opening the door, Sarah was met with the sight of Claire, her colleague, and the embodiment of comfort she hadn't realized she craved. Claire stood there, a slight smile playing on her lips, her hair tousled as if she had rushed over. The warm light from Sarah's home spilled out into the chilly evening air, inviting and bright. "Thought I'd check in on you," Claire said, her tone casual, yet layered with concern. Sarah hesitated for a moment. It felt strange to be seen in her vulnerability, even by someone who had witnessed her openness at the meeting. Yet the warmth in Claire's eyes urged her to step aside and allow the light of companionship to flood in. "Come in," Sarah finally replied, stepping back to let Claire enter. As Claire crossed the threshold, Sarah felt the walls of her sanctuary shift ever so slightly, as if welcoming a new energy. "I was just about to have dinner. Would you like to join me?" Sarah offered, trying to infuse the invitation with enthusiasm despite her unease. "I'd love to," Claire replied, offering a friendly nudge as she made her way to the dining area, her gaze falling upon the extra place setting. "You set an extra spot? Is that for a guest?" Sarah's stomach twisted, the weight of honesty looming over her. "It's for Tom. I sometimes set a place for him." The admission fell from her lips unguarded, and she braced herself for Claire's reaction. With an unwavering gaze, Claire responded, "That's beautiful, Sarah. It's a way of acknowledging his presence in your life. And it's absolutely okay to honor him." Something inside Sarah shifted. She realized how important it was to voice her ongoing grief and make space for her husband, even in her healing. Claire's acceptance, a reflection of the community she'd begun to build, sparked a little ember of confidence within her. They sat down, and as they broke bread together, Sarah found herself sharing stories from the past week. Anecdotes from work, small victories from her interactions, and the growing realization that her vulnerability was slowly morphing into a newfound strength. With every bite, that raw sense of connection smeared away the remnants of isolation, making room for a healthier perspective on her professional aspirations. Encouraged by Claire's listening presence, Sarah ventured into discussing her plans for the resilience workshop. As she unfolded her vision, Claire leaned in, her enthusiasm palpable. "You can't just talk about it. You need to create experiences for them. Use your story, your emotions. It will resonate." The idea clung tentatively in Sarah's mind. Linking her past struggles to actionable workshops was a bold move. But could she transform her pain into a source of strength for others? Self-doubt flickered within her. What if they did not connect with her narratives? "Sarah, the truth is, everyone has a story," Claire continued, seemingly catching the flicker of uncertainty. "And stories can change lives. You have a gift. You know that, right? You have the ability to foster true growth in others." Claire's words looped and echoed in Sarah's head, igniting a blend of determination and fear. This was not simply about sharing. It was about leading her colleagues through the trials of their lives, with her experiences as a beacon. Suddenly, the evening's warmth felt electric. The prospect of the workshop was no longer a random idea. It pulsed with meaning. Sarah's heart raced, but this time it was anticipation that drove the beat, coiling excitement around the edges of her fear. As she cleared the table, Claire's phone buzzed and she glanced at it, her expression shifting. "We might need to take a rain check on this euphoria. My husband just texted, 'Something's come up. I'll check in with you tomorrow?'" "Of course," Sarah replied, feeling the momentum of the dinner linger in the air. Claire slipped out into the night, leaving Sarah alone again. But this time it felt different. She turned back to the table and caught sight of the empty setting. It no longer felt heavy. It felt like a promise anchored in the past, but reaching forward. She knew what she needed to do. The workshop was just the first step towards embracing her story. As the door clicked shut behind Claire, Sarah felt a surge of resolve breaking through the uncertainty. This was not just about connection. It was about transformational growth. Suddenly, her resolve settled into a single thought. Perhaps my greatest journey lies ahead. And with a sense of purpose igniting within her, Sarah picked up her notebook, ready to put pen to paper. She would map out that workshop, and with it, the start of a new chapter. But as she glanced at her notes laid out on the table, a lingering question gnawed at her. Was she truly ready to face the emotional turmoil that sharing her story would resurrect? She pressed her lips together, determination rising. Her heart quickened once more, setting the stage for whatever would come next. In the following weeks, Sarah fully embraced her vision of the workshop, with an enthusiasm she hadn't felt in years. Each evening she devoted hours to drafting her curriculum, intertwining her personal narrative about resilience alongside relevant theoretical frameworks. This was not simply a teaching exercise. It became her personal reclamation, an opportunity to honor her journey while creating space for her students and colleagues to share their own. The workshop, scheduled for the end of the month, stirred an electrifying mixture of anticipation and apprehension in her. As she prepared materials and activities that encouraged vulnerability and peer support, she sensed the weight of Tom's absence hovering in the background. But rather than feeling stifled by it, she found strength in his memory. His encouragement echoed in her mind, urging her forward. The day of the workshop arrived with a vibrant buzz in the air that mirrored her inner landscape. As she set up the classroom, arranging chairs in a circle to foster open communication, she took a moment to breathe deeply. This was her space for healing, to blend professional aspirations with the raw honesty of her personal struggles. As colleagues entered, Sarah welcomed them with warmth, feeling a sense of camaraderie enveloping the room. When the time came to begin, her heart raced, but an unmistakable confidence surged within her. She introduced herself and laid out the format of the workshop: frameworks for personal storytelling, reflections on loss and resilience, and the creation of a safe space for sharing. Today is about discovery, she opened, glancing at each face in the circle. It's about allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, not to wallow in our pain, but to transform it into strength. The classroom resonated with quiet nods. She could see sparks of recognition in their eyes. Throughout the workshop there were moments of laughter, moments of stillness, and moments that begged for tears. Sarah skillfully guided the group, weaving in her story of loss and the importance of resilience. As they partnered up to share their own narratives, she felt a blossoming connection, a shared vulnerability that chipped away at isolation. She introduced activities that invited each colleague to link their own experiences with concepts of resilience. In the shared reflections, stories poured forth, tales of struggles, breakthroughs, and the intricate tapestry of life's journey. They engaged in discussions that fulfilled and lifted her, as if the very act of sharing lightened their burdens. Sarah felt a profound sense of purpose wash over her, solidifying her newfound identity, not just as a teacher but as a guide in their collective exploration of resilience. The highlights of those exchanges crystallized into insights, lifting murmurs of hope and determination. As delicate emotions filled the air, Sarah caught Claire's eye, and the warmth in Claire's smile acted as a reminder of the support she had nurtured. Their vulnerability became a bridge, knitting them together as a functioning team. As the workshop winding down, Sarah encouraged participants to share one takeaway from the day. One by one, expressions of gratitude poured out, each rich with emotion. "Thank you for your bravery, Sarah. It inspired us all," came a heartfelt comment from Marcus. Another teacher stated, "Your willingness to share helps us realize we're not alone." The affirmations swelled within her, fueling a burgeoning confidence. But just as her heart began to swell with pride, a quiet doubt visited, a reminder of the voices that once echoed her fears. What about failure? What if this wasn't enough to mend the broken parts of her own heart? The specter of inadequacy crept close once more. Yet she shook it off, recognizing that it was a natural part of growth. Stepping away from those feelings, she felt a recognition that spoke of real accomplishment. By becoming the conduit for her colleagues' stories, she had reclaimed her narrative, intertwining her past with the promise of growth for herself and others. At the end of the workshop, Sarah gathered her notes, her heart aflame with a blazing clarity. She was not just a teacher. She was a facilitator of authentic connection, illuminating the diverse facets of human experiences. Transformative powers lay in the honesty of sharing stories, a lesson she had wrestled to understand herself. With a new resilience forming within her, she decided to continue the conversations beyond the workshop. Encouraged by the connections forged, she proposed a monthly gathering. an informal space for ongoing dialogue about resilience. Linking each session back to the collective journeys of every participant, the response was nothing short of exhilarating. Her colleagues expressed eagerness to participate, reveling in the community she had planted. The camaraderie built within those dialogues was blossoming beyond her expectations. And as Sarah stood before her students the following week, she felt a solid confidence she hadn't experienced in ages. The phantom weight of loss transformed into a silent ally, a reminder that growth comes not only from resilience, but from community and shared humanity. In the month that followed, Sarah found a new balance. Intertwining her personal healing with her professional responsibilities began to yield tangible results. She restructured her lessons to include themes of emotional intelligence, encouraging her students to explore their narratives and validate their feelings. Sparse moments of reflection filled her thoughts daily, bridging the connections she'd fostered through her workshop. The empty seat at the dinner table became an emblem of her evolving identity, a testament to her journey, a symbol of resilience woven into every layer of her life. As she wrapped up her lesson one day, Sarah gazed across the classroom of young faces, recognizing their individual strengths. She felt proud not just as an educator, but as someone who had embraced vulnerability, conquered her fears, and built a community that flourished in transparency. Across the country, her story continued, resonating within her own chapters, a tapestry of hope and transformation etched into the rhythms of everyday life. What started as a profound loss had forged a celebration of life, and in every echo of laughter and shared wisdom, she found fulfillment. In honoring her past, Sarah had crafted a rich mosaic of resilience that extended far beyond herself, illuminating pathways for others navigating similar storms. Finally at peace with her choices and her journey, she embraced the future with a solid sense of confidence and purpose, proving to herself and to others that vulnerability could birth strength, reveal connections, and inspire growth. As Sarah reflected on these developments, she felt the strong urge to share this journey with others far and wide, recognizing how significantly it had transformed her life. To those still grappling with sorrow, uncertainty, or the daunting path of growing into their true selves, Sarah knew she had the power to inspire and uplift. In that moment, a newfound commitment ignited within her, a call to action that echoed deeply. She grabbed her notebook and wrote down an inspiring note. Never shy away from sharing your story. You might just be the light somebody else desperately needs to find their own courage to shine. With unwavering resolve, Sarah understood that the journey of personal growth, intertwined with professional development, was never truly over. This was merely another evolving chapter, one rich with satisfaction, fulfillment, and endless potential. And now, dear viewers, this is your moment. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will resonate with your heart. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and make our community grow stronger. Your support is essential in keeping these important conversations alive. Comment your reactions and theories about Sarah's transformation and the incredible insights you've garnered along the way. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and embark on their own journeys of self-discovery. Don't wait even one more second to be a part of this transformative experience. Your engagement is what fuels our connection. Let's build a community that celebrates every individual's path to strength and resilience.